Greetings, my fellow Americans, and welcome to another episode of the Great Montana Conspiracy Podcast. Tonight we're going to be tackling the subject of elitism, which is something I've been wanting to talk about for quite a while because it is such an important underlying principle of any conspiracy or any good old boy network or any time you have corruption, because it always refers to one group's belief of privilege above another group. In this case, it all started, the reason why this particular issue is becoming relevant right now and why I'm kind of advancing it on my chart of subjects to talk about is because, as is so common in Kalispell, the issue has breached itself upon my doorstep. Literally. Well, technically, against the back wall of my apartment. Now, just for anyone who doesn't understand the geographics of where I live, which 99.9999% of you out there, I live above a bookstore downtown. It's Blacktail Mountain Bookstore in Kalispell, Montana. They're a great bookstore. Highly recommended if you ever make it to Kalispell, come check it out. It's a great used bookstore. But I live in one of the apartments upstairs. Directly next door, without any space between us, used to be a business called Illumiglass. And then on the other side of that business, again without any kind of spacing, there used to be the Rosebriar. Well, the Rosebriar had gotten bought out and turned into My Home, which is basically, it's still the same facility under a different name and renovated somewhat to be more up to code, up to standards. But basically, the idea is it's um, designed to basically be a transient dwelling, but it's basically more of a permanent dwelling for low income. The common rooms are like the bathrooms and the kitchen are common rooms. They don't have any of those facilities within most of the rooms. So they end up just having a place to sleep. They have to come out into the common areas to use the restroom or to use the kitchen or whatever. Um, the Lumiglass closed down a few months ago. Another business took its place. And for the last several months, they've been renovating. And the business is known as Hank's Hatchets Axe Throwing. Now, a record search will indicate that one Jared DeAndrea is the listed agent. Presumably, he's the owner of the business and the corporation. But regardless, um, they've been a fairly successful business up in Whitefish. Now in Whitefish, they have none of the complaints or issues they have here, because they are a building that is basically, apparently, now I've never been up there myself, this is purely by report, is not connected to other buildings. It's fairly isolated enough that whatever happens inside of it's not going to affect anyone else around. When they decided for a Kalispell location, they specifically chose the former Lumiglass facility, being fully aware that it is directly adherent to two other buildings on either side, both of which are tenancy dwellings. The bookstore and above it are 3 apartments. I am one of those apartments. And then, of course, there's dozens of residents on the other side in the My Home, which formerly the Rosebriar Inn, here in Kalispell. For whatever reason, whether it be cheapness, whether it be expediency, whether it be just a complete indifference or indignity and hope of driving tenants out, they decided when they opened up this business that they were going to mount, just to be clear for anybody who doesn't understand what this concept is, it's kind of a lumberjacking skill where you take weighted axes and you throw them at a target with sticking them, much like you would a dart with smaller applications, but these are heavy axes. And they're weighted axes. They're not like little dinky little aluminum things. They're heavy axes, and sometimes called hatchets. And they are thrown with extreme force at the target to embed them in the target. Much like you would any other sport, obviously, the presumed goal is to hit the center. It's not so much the goal or the action that is at issue. The action at issue is that the force being used to send this axe across the room and embed it in the target is incredibly forceful. It's not a light issue. It's not we'll just kind of toss it. This is a full body, throw it on, heavy throwing action. And as I said, they decided to set up this place that they were going to mount all of the targets along the building, the wall that borders my building, and then also along the wall that borders My Home. which is the previous rosebriar. And I'll often call it the rosebriar because it has always been the rosebriar for me, and it's just easier to reference it as the rosebriar. Whether my belief, purely my belief, not based upon any outside information, is that they simply did this because they recognized that both the Rosebriar's building and the bookstore are brick construction or cement construction, solid walls. They have they have an inner wall that runs down the middle of this building, that runs um, perpendicular to the walls outlying. So you basically have the two outlying walls, and you have a wall right here in the middle that runs the length of the building. They could easily have reinforced that middle wall, put the targets on these walls, and been no issue. Instead, and again, whether it be for cheapness, expediency, whatever the reason, I think it is deliberate. They chose to mount them on the outside walls, to where all thrown axes, all hits, all strikes, all whatever, hits and resoundingly hits the wall of the building directly behind me. Now, just to give you an idea of how loud and percussive the sound is, they're on the ground floor. I'm actually upstairs. Okay. I'm on the ground. They're on the ground floor. There is an area of about this much space between the lower area and the upper area. It's kind of a buffer, crawl space sort of place for repairs, pipes, what have you. And then there is the hallway, which is directly behind me. And then there is my apartment. Now, anyone who understands physics or how sound travels, oftentimes you baffle sound, or you stop sound by insulating and creating space. You basically use the space to absorb and muffle the sound, and then that way it doesn't continue on past the different areas. So in all theory and idea, if this was an inconvenient little light sound, you'd have the bookstore below, the floor below, and the hallway behind me to act as 3 levels of buffers between me and the sound. Yet when they are throwing their axes, and I'm not talking just occasionally once an hour, I'm talking repeatedly, thump, the thump, 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 the thump, 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 constantly, persistently, percussion-y, I can't hear my television. My cats run and hide. It's got my anxiety through the roof. I literally have to leave my house because I cannot focus. It gives me a headache. The vibrations give me a headache. So, now, anyone hearing this, what I'm describing, should see this as a very straightforward argument. Clearly, they're intrusive. Clearly, they're making it loud. Clearly, they're disrupting the general public. They're disrupting the welfare of the neighborhood. Any number of things. Any number of reasons. This should stand out as a very common sense issue. Welcome to Kalispell, Montana. Welcome to the Great Montana Conspiracy. And, more importantly, welcome to the elitism that underlines it all. And this is where I'm going to explain that. Now, to further explain how this business works, as I said, it's primarily an axe throwing business. They throw axes at mounted targets that are placed on the walls, in this case, the outline walls of the building, that are directly in connection to the neighboring buildings. There is no separation, there's no alley, there's no space. It is directly wall to wall. Yes, there is a separate wall of the building that I'm in and a separate wall of the aluminum glass building, and they are built directly next to each other. But there is no significant space. They are adjoined. There is no separation. There's no space. They are adjoined buildings. As I said, the building has a center wall running in the middle. So they could have reinforced the target. They could have reinforced that center wall and used that wall to have the exact same throwing distance. They could have buffered the targets, created some kind of an insulation behind them, some kind of the ability to absorb the impact, some kind of cushioning, sound effect, sound buffering, some kind of soundproofing. They've made no effort to do anything of the sort. There's absolutely nothing separating the loud conk sound of that axe hitting that target and the wall. There is nothing. And it is so loud, so pervasive, that it goes through three layers of buffering, and it still is so loud I cannot hear my TV. I have had to wait to record because you literally cannot hear me talking when it's going off. The speaker on my iPhone literally hears that and zones me out. So if it's going on, I can't do anything. It's Monday night, and apparently, thankfully, Monday night appears to be slower. There was a time earlier I started to record this and was not able to because the sound was just. I wanted actually to record it with the sound in the background because I wanted you guys to hear it. But the truth is, you couldn't hear me, which means it'd be basically going like, "This is," and "this is," and 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 that's how it would go the whole episode. So for a half hour, I had to sit back and wait for the sound to stop. And I was thinking that tonight I wasn't going to be able to record until probably close to 10 o'clock tonight. But it's after 8 o'clock, and I think they must have closed or just been really slow for Monday night. Don't know. Friday when they opened, Saturday, and even yesterday, it was far more constant, far more percussive, far more. They opened up Friday night. And we have had absolutely no peace from their opening. When this happened, of course, they opened the Friday after Thanksgiving holiday. For anyone who's not aware, Thursday is always Thanksgiving, and as often the case, Kalispell City government shuts down Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of Thanksgiving week. So there is no city office to go to complain. There's no building department. There's no city attorney's office. There's no anyone. That's it. Nothing that can be done. They opened up Friday with no recourse to go to the city and complain about this, except the police department. And I'll get to that in a moment. My first response, when I heard how loud and invasive this was and percussive this was and how it was just hurting my head and I couldn't record Friday night to do my Saturday podcast, I went next door and said, I asked to speak to somebody, directing to the owner. The conversation lasted literally 30 seconds. Literally, there was no back and forth. There was no attempt to find a common ground. I asked, do you have targets on this wall, indicating the wall behind me? He said, yeah. I said, is there any way you can move them? I have a podcast I'm trying to record right now, and I can't even hear myself think, much less be able to record anything. His immediate response was, I'm a business and I can do whatever I want with my business. I said, are you serious? And his response was, I've got all the licensing I need. Take it up with the city. I said, I guess I'll have to. I turned to walk away, and his response was, go ahead, my attorney's better than your attorney. That is literally conversation, ladies and gentlemen. There's no way to expound upon it because that's it. It was 3 exchanges back and forth. His immediate response was, I don't care. Go talk to the city. It's not my problem. My attorney's better than yours. That was his response. So, I called the police. Understand? Disturbing the peace, disorderly conduct, whatever you want to call it. Clearly an issue that's disturbing. An officer, Ron Clacker, responded to the call and immediately defended the business. Immediately. He admitted to being a patron of the Whitefish location. He then expressed intimate knowledge of how the inside of the building layout was here, which indicated he was fairly familiar with this location already, even though it had not opened its doors until that day. He said his words were, it's not fair to expect their business to use only their back wall and not use the outlying walls. It wouldn't be fair to them. They chose a location that had residences on both sides. His argument, Officer Clacker's argument, was that it wasn't fair to their brand new spanking business to not be able to use the outlying walls of their business to create a concussive hazard, to create a nuisance, to create loud and unusual noises. It wasn't fair to them. Ignore the fact that this is one business and dozens of residences within the scope that they are affecting. It's not fair to the business. That was his answer. That was his response. I literally asked him, I said, so you're telling me is that because you prefer the business, you won't enforce the law? He says, that's not what I'm saying at all. I have no authority to go in there and tell them to stop. I have no authority to do anything. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not breaking the law. That was his literal response to me. I spent like 10 minutes on the phone going back and forth with him, trying to get him to get off this position. That was his position. The business had the right. I didn't. I mean, it was an insane argument. He claimed, even the officer claimed immediately that they had all the business licenses they needed. And they didn't need. How is he supposed to know they had business licenses or not? Honestly, how is he supposed to know this if he doesn't have an intimate knowledge of it? Of course he has intimate knowledge. He's already admitted to being a patron of the Whitefish branch. He already admitted to knowing the layout of the facility here. Of course he knows whether they've got all the licenses or not, because he's obviously biased. Well, I called back and said, this is ridiculous. I said, I want it lodged that he's not doing his duty under the law. He's not enforcing the law. The dispatcher told me to have the sergeant call me. Well, Officer Clacker called me back and brought a statement by for me to fill out, which he said he would take to the county attorney or the city attorney's office, which of course left the rest of Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, and into today. Before I could even, of course, they don't open their doors till 2 o'clock, so technically you can't count today. But I spoke with the city attorney's office this morning. The lady I talked to, immediately, her first response was that her initial impression was in alignment and agreement with the Kalispell Police Department, that there was nothing they could do. I said, excuse me. Now, mind you, before I called the police, I had to look at the state statutes. I had looked up the Kalispell Municipal Code. I had gotten the codes. I had them right in front of me. Neither one wanted to hear them. Okay? The police officer, Ron Clacker, didn't want to hear them. The city attorney said it wasn't her issue. It wasn't her place to decide, but she would look into it. At least she said she would look into it. She said that she couldn't understand that surely the business has had some kind of a walkthrough. Now, having been a former business owner myself, there's no requirements for walkthroughs in Kalispell. Kalispell literally doesn't even have a properly enforced business license. In fact, the only thing on the books in Kalispell is if you have an additional business operating out of the same location, you have to have a license. But one business, no requirement for a license. There's nothing on the books. There's nothing on the books for a single-purposed business to have a license. My landlord had actually made an inquiry of a friend he knew, and the only thing they could find was an electrical inspection. But the electrical inspection would have happened before they mounted any fixtures on the wall, because in order for an electrical inspection to come out and do a proper inspection of the electrical, the walls have to be clear for them to actually inspect where any electrical outlets, lines, whatever are. So clearly, that's not the issue. And even if they were mounted, the electrician's not there to make a determination of whether or not there is a loud concussive noise that will be issued from these things, or whether there's proper insulation behind these, or whether there's proper soundproofing, anything of that nature. He's an electrician, ladies and gentlemen. An electrician's job is not to sit here and make decisions beyond the realm of electrical conduits, outlets, flow of electricity, that kind of stuff. So how can an electrician make that kind of determination? So the lady I spoke to at the city attorney's office said that she was going to look into it. She was going to talk to the building department, find out if anybody had done a walkthrough or inspection of the property, find out if they're in code, find out if they're within proper respects. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, how many times in the past do you think it's ever come up to the business, or to the city council, or to anybody else making laws in this city, as to whether to allow axe throwing as a legitimate business? I don't think it's probably ever been considered by the city council as even a concept. whether heavy projectiles being thrown at a wall wasn't even a consideration. And why? Because there's laws on the books that say you can't do this. Not throw axes, but you can't make loud and unusual noises which affect the public walking by or the neighborhood. I think throwing weighted heavy axes that can be heard through 3 layers of buffering is well within the range of definition of loud and unnatural sounds. I would hope that anybody hearing this would be in agreement with that, because quite frankly, it doesn't make any common sense otherwise. I mean, literally, how would you feel if I was standing outside your house and throwing rocks at your back wall all day for 8 hours? I'm just going to throw rocks at the back wall. Just throw rocks at the back wall. Would you like it? Wouldn't you come out and tell me to stop? Wouldn't you call the police? Wouldn't I be arrested? Just throwing a basketball at the back of your house. Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. Someone in the front throwing pebbles at your front window. Even if this guy's causing 0 damage. The very fact that I was creating a noise that was unusual, disturbing to the tenants of that residence would have had me arrested. Guaranteed. If I did that to this neighboring business, if I stood outside on the sidewalk and I threw pebbles at their window all day for 8 hours, I would be arrested. I guarantee you I would be arrested for throwing pebbles at their window. Anyone would. It's common sense. So why is it not illegal for them to throw axes at the wall? When it's the wall of my building and it's affecting my ability to have quiet enjoyment of my premises. I ask you, what common sense is this? At any rate, the city attorney's office has said to contact them again on Wednesday, and they will make a decision at that point whether to prosecute for violations of city ordinances or whether to basically ignore it. If they ignore it, the only recourse I'm going to have, there's a couple of recourses I have. One is to call the mayor's office and see if the mayor will speak to me, because the mayor does have the power to revoke any licensing issued in the community. So if the premise is that there's supposedly a ephemeral business license or electrical permit or building code license or allowance, he can revoke it. He can say, no, not allowed. Business can't operate here. And then he has to, of course, take it to the city council, and the city council has to ratify it. So it is possible, not something I think is going to happen, but it is possible. The next step would be to go to court and get a civil injunction against the business and cite the heck that I've been here for 10 years. I've been living in this apartment for 10 years. And in those 10 years, I've never had to worry about this. And now I do. And I can't rest. I can't find ease. It's terrorizing my animals. It's just my neighbor. She works nights. She has to sleep during the day. She's not enjoying this at all. It's just the tenants over at the Rosebriar are not enjoying this at all. No one is enjoying this except the person who's collecting money for the people who are throwing axes. Because he doesn't care. This Jared DeAndrea, Hank's Hatchets Axe Throwing, they might be a great business up in Whitefish. They are a bane upon Kalispell. They are the worst conceivable kind of business you can imagine, of the kind that do not care beyond their own pocketbook. They don't care if what they do harms anyone. They don't care if it harms the community, whether it harms the neighborhood, whether it harms people's mental health, whether it terrorizes animals, causes harm to the environment. They don't care anything, because all they care about is collecting money to throw axes. That's it. That's all they care about. There's no impact statement. There's no attempt to find out whether or not it was going to be invasive to the community or the neighborhood. Nothing. They just came in here and started throwing axes. Then there's so many other buildings around downtown Kalispell that are empty right now that do not have neighboring buildings next to them that they could have used. There are so many buildings downtown that do have neighboring buildings that are not residential. They chose this one. And they chose this one without any concern or care about anything beyond their own pocketbook or how much profit and money they can make. That is the worst kind of business. The opportunists. people who don't care who they hurt to get a dollar. And that's what kind of business we got here. And just to be clear, this is an example of elitism. Is elitism because they think they're entitled. And the problem is that within the Great Montana Conspiracy and within the elitism that already pre-exists in Kalispell, they're sheltered by the higher powers that be. You have a structure. You have government, the city government, county government, state government. They have power over everybody. They're above the law. Of course, the police, being the executive arm of the city government, of course, the sheriff being the executive arm, the powerful arm, the administrative arm, the force behind the power of the government. They're the ones who, they fall somewhere in between, but they certainly fall above everybody else. The police are better than everyone except the government officials above them. Businesses and wealthy people are next in the tier. They have priority and exclusive elitist rights above everybody else. And it's the common citizens. People who make up the majority of the workforce, the majority of the population, the community, they have no rights because they're not part of this elite group, this elite status. Just in a quick nutshell, elitism by definition is a group of people who believe for whatever reason that they're entitled to better treatment, better considerations than other people, whether it be based on race, whether it be based on economics, whether it be based on whatever. That's elitism. Now, I'm going to get a little more technical. This is actually from the Oxford Dictionary. Elitism is the belief or notion that individuals who form an elite, a select group of people perceived as having an intrinsic quality, high intellect, wealth, power, notability, special skills, or experience, are more likely to be constructive to society as a whole and therefore deserve influence or authority greater than that of others. Does this sound at all familiar? The police department made the determination that the business is more likely to be constructive to society than the people who live here and have lived here for decades. That's elitism. It also exists within what's known as social stratification, and which is basically saying that you have different strata, different levels of authority within this elitist structure. Government is better than everyone. The police are just slightly under the government, but better than everybody else. Businesses or wealthy people are next in line. They're more valuable than the common people who are the bottom of the tier. And guess, by the way, just as a really quick aside, guess which people end up in jail and taking up the massive population in the jail centers as the common citizens. 99% of the population of the prison population in Montana consists of people who are not business owners, who are not wealthy, who are not members of the police force, and who are not members of the government. Because the elitists very rarely fall. It is the common people who are persecuted because the elitists are entitled to better treatment, better exclusion, better entitlements. That's it. Now, just to be clear, and I don't know how to be clearer than this is against the law. What they are doing is against the law. And I'm going to cite some laws to you, and I'm going to summarize in relevant parts. I'm going to actually use actual language from the laws in most cases. A lot of times I'm going to summarize it just because I'm not going to sit there and read the entire very lengthy law to you. Which is an example. Montana Code Annotated, Section 45.8.101, 1A, subcategory 3. A person commits the offense of disorderly conduct if making loud or unusual noises. Very simple, very straightforward, right? Seems like it. Loud and unusual noises constitutes disorderly conduct. It's a misdemeanor. A cumulative misdemeanor on this can go up to $500 per offense, a day in jail, just progressively higher. MCA Section 732.4302, so that's 7-32-4302, states that within the city or town and within 3 miles of the limits thereof, the city or town council has power to prevent and punish loud noises and acts of conduct calculated to disturb the public peace or which are offensive to public morals. In other words, the city council has the power. Now keep in mind, the police force is under the city council. They are the power behind the throne. They answer to the mayor and the city council. The city council, therefore, and the mayor have the power to instruct the police department to enforce the laws of their community, and specifically, Montana Code Annotated specifically gives them the power, specifically, to enforce order. You can't get plainer than that. Then you start going into what's known as the Kalispell Municipal Code. These are the actual city codes. Kalispell Municipal Code, KMC 18-2, gives the right of entry to inspect for nuisances to any officer or representative of the police force, whether it be the chief of police, an officer, whatever. Gives the authority to enter the property to determine whether a crime is being committed. It gives them the right. If there's a crime being committed, such as disturbing the peace, loud, obstructive noises, whatever, they have the right to enter the premises and make a determination whether the crime is being committed. KMC 19-8. This is significant. No person will be permitted to commit to any house or place kept or maintained by him or her any loud or unnatural noise, singing, playing, or dancing of a kind and nature offensive or annoying to passers-by or to the neighborhood. Relevant language, but the language of the law. Group that with the previous one. Police have the right to enter a facility to determine if this crime is being committed. That's a crime, ladies and gentlemen. A natural noise that is such that it will disturb passers-by or the neighborhood. It's a crime. The police can come on the premises, can determine that a crime is being committed, and stop it. In fact, it's right there in the law. The law gives them this power. KMC 22-2 gives police, again, Kalispell Municipal Code, 22-2 gives police the power to prevent and detect crime. Prevent and detect. You have a crime being committed, they have the right to prevent it. They have the right. Remember what Officer Clacker said. I don't have the right to do anything. I can't do anything. I don't have the power to do anything. He's lying. He doesn't want to. It's not that he doesn't have the power to. He doesn't want to. Now, to advance this even further, KMC 19-10A2 specifically states that a person commits the offense of disorderly conduct if the person within the city limits disturbs the peace by making unnecessarily loud and uncustomary noise for that place and time. So, the first, 19-8, stated that it's actually a crime to make unusual noises to annoy passersby of the neighborhood. 2 laws later say a person commits the offense of disorderly conduct. So 19.8 says you can't do it. 19.10 says if you do it, it's called disorderly conduct, and it's a crime. And it makes it making unreasonably loud, uncustomary noise for that place and time. Throwing axes at a wall with loud concussive force that could be felt through 3 buffers of space and be so loud and pervasive as to disrupt television, to harass animals, to deprive people of sleep is unusual. It is loud and it is unusual. Then we have KMC, Kalispell Municipal Code 19-17, which says every person who shall, in the city, willfully advocate the commission of any offense or breach of the peace, which shall tend to encourage or advocate disrespect for laws or any ordinance of the city, shall be guilty of the offense of inciting disorder. This business next door is inciting people to make loud and percussive noise in violation of the statutes of the city. Their entire business is framed around it. Please come in, pay us money. We will give you axes to throw at the wall and make loud and percussive noises to annoy and pester and commit crime. We'll let you do this. We encourage you to do this. In fact, we encourage you to pay us to let you the privilege of doing this. Once again, police have the right and the power through Kalispell Municipal Code 22-2 to recognize that a crime is being committed, and to prevent it. So when Officer Clacker said he had no power to do anything, he was lying. Because the business is more important in the elitist structure than the common person, me making the complaint, or my landlord, or the tenants of the Rosebriar, or anybody else making the complaint. The business is not fair to the business. His words, not fair to the business to not be able to be allowed to do this. It's not fair to the business that they should not be allowed to commit crime. That's literally what the police officer was saying. It's not fair to the business to not let them commit crimes. That is literally what he was saying. Literally. I mean, how else do you look at it? That's what you say. When you say it's not fair to let the business do what they're doing, knowing that what they're doing is a crime, one leads to the next. The bottom line is the law is crystal clear that loud and unusual noises which tend to disturb the peace of the public or neighborhood, they are a crime and they are enforceable by the city. So how is it that the city's not enforcing them, and why? This business is given a clear privilege and protection to do what they wish in violation of the law. Very clearly written statutory law. Because they are a business, there's no other qualification. They are a business, and it's not fair as a business to not be allowed to disturb the peace of common people. Elitism. Once again, Kalispell Municipal Code 22-2 gives police the power to prevent and detect crime. They refused. Kalispell Municipal Code 15-4 gives Mayor Mark Johnson, that's our mayor right now, Mark Johnson, and he has the power to revoke the license. Will he? Doubt it. Kalispell Municipal Code Section 2-54 gives the city attorney the sole power to cite and issue injunctions for offenses against the city code of the city code. Will they? Doubtful. Will I be compelled after Wednesday to seek a civil injunction, knowing my history with the courts, knowing they routinely deprive me just the most deliberate disregard of civil rights and equality and law? Will I have any effect? Will it do any good? Or am I going to have to move as the whole neighborhood and have to move out of here because it's not fair to this business to do this? Now, this is not the first time elitism has popped up in my life or in my stories. I've been talking about elitism all along. I mean, the entire political imprisonment I endure and suffer under is because the police department decided that they had the right to commit crimes, i.e., sexually harass, sexually assault teenagers out on 3rd and Main. And by my virtue of me trying to go in and get the kids to make statements against the police department, they were entitled to commit the crimes, and I had to be punished for trying to hold them accountable for it. The Rosebriar, before it was taken over by its new management, I can't speak for the new management. I haven't had a whole lot of communication with the actual owners. Manager over there seems really nice. Like him, get along with him, pretty cool. But the Rosebriar, back when they were under old management, protected from a lawsuit for violating landlord-tenant laws. Because under the laws of the state of Montana, pardon me, under the state's laws of Montana, in order to be the Rosebriar falls under the category of what they call a transient dwelling, which means they don't have to apply to landlord-tenant laws. They don't have to apply to, habitable dwelling requirements. They don't have to file eviction proceedings. They don't have to give eviction notices. They can literally get out 24 hours that day. Get out. We don't want you here. I'm suddenly got a cough. I apologize. And the police actually will be the ones evicting. They will come in and they will remove people from the premises. They will act as a security agency for the Rosebriar. They will come in. They will say, okay, you've got to leave the premises. There's private property, you have to leave. Doesn't matter how long you've lived there. You could live there 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Less than 12 hours, you could be out the door. Less than a few hours, you could be out the door. All the manager had to do was call the police department. The police department would come in and enforce the eviction. No court order, no writ of possession, no nothing. In order to be a transient dwelling, the tenants have to be there less than 10 days or less. People live there for 30 days. They literally collect rent for 30 days at a time. They are, under law, a landlord-tenant situation and circumstance, but they've been protected and sheltered, or they were protected and sheltered by the city police, by the city government, by the courts, because of the elitist structure here in the town. Routinely, government has free reign in this town. They can do whatever they want. They can commit whatever crimes. Then the businesses and the wealthy, they have priority, and then they have the privilege, and then it's the common folk, and common folk have nothing. And as I've said, make note what 99% of the population of the prison system consists of: the common people, the people who are not wealthy, the people who do not have businesses, the people who do not have positions in government. It's a completely disproportionate issue because they're the ones who are seen as having no rights. I have often said the people of Montana only have civil rights if the government wants them to. The 14th Amendment requires that equal protection means equal treatment and equal access to the law. So when a business can sit here and say, doesn't apply to us, I'm a business, I can do whatever I want. There is no 14th Amendment equal protection, equal access, equal treatment. Once again, if I were just standing out there throwing pebbles at their window all day, I'd be the one going to jail. It doesn't matter they're throwing axes at my wall, but I could throw pebbles at their window all day. I would go to jail. I'd be causing zero damage. I'm just disturbing them. I'd go to jail. It's a crime. It is a crime. If I were throwing the pebbles, I would deserve to go to jail. It is a crime. But their offense is so much graver, and they're given exclusive elitist privilege to continue to do it. And therein lies the problem. And it's a manifest example of elitism. And elitism is the core of any good old boy network. And it's no exception in Kalispell, Montana. How do we solve it? Get this information out there. Tell people about it. Spread the word. Make people aware. Because it's the only way change will ever happen. Sitting back and choosing to suppress this information by posting negative comments or the down arrow on whatever site you're watching this on, or just simply choosing not to share this information, is only empowering these corrupt people. And this is a manifestation of corruption. I appreciate you guys listening in tonight. If you have any questions, of course, forward them to me. And as I always say before I end these, if at all possible, please be safe, and please, if it's at all possible, be free. Thank you.